What is going on, everybody? How's everybody doing tonight? It is your boy Mike, your deck designer. Welcome to tonight's show. Tonight we got a fun one coming in hot. So earlier this week we sat down with a bunch of people. We had talked about what kind of stuff we wanted to do this episode, and we landed on a couple things. One of which was Landfall, because who doesn't love lands? And the other thing is, I personally have been wanting to brew a Yarrick deck for I don't know, a billion years. So we're going to do that tonight. I ran a couple things through Reddit. I asked the people, I said, hey, what do you guys want to brew? And the answer resoundingly was either any of the three Omnaths that exist or Yarrick. So, while we're here, while we're hanging out, I'd like to welcome you to Deck Design. My name is Mike. I'm going to take you down this ride every Thursday night from 7 to 9. And our objective here is to sit down and make some beautiful, beautiful decks together. We're going to sit down and kind of flesh out all the things for you to brew better than you are currently. Look, I'm not the top brewer in the world. I'm not going to come up with the greatest brand new meta breaking thing. But what I can say is I have had a lot of experience brewing a lot of decks. I've been on a hunt for the color wheel for, I don't know, a year and a half straight now, just trying to complete decks and brew them and test them out consistently. And I've learned a lot in that time. I play with a meta that's very strong. And I've learned a lot just from those people in terms of how do I get it done? How do I make these decks happen? So I'm here to provide that to you guys, and I'd love to get the chat input as well, right? So we are a social network. We are trying to reach out, and what I'd love to do is to get some new players in here that are, brand new to the deck building scene, and spend some time really fleshing out what does it take to make a decent deck? How do we do that, right? So how do we isolate out all those things? Our hopes in doing this show is to make newer brewers more effective in their deck design. How do they deliver their win cons overall, and how do they make that whole thing happen? The understanding of how to brew an effective EDH deck, which is one of the hardest things to do in Magic, because you're dealing with 99 cards that are singleton cards, right? If you're going with a 40 land base, right, we want to use 60 cards left, 59 if you're not including your commander, and they're one-ofs, so you really have to get the value out of all of the cards that you play, right? We want to take care of every single corner that we're crossing. How do we make sure the value is there and we're not wasting that card slot on something that really doesn't exist? It's not really something that we want to focus in on. If you need more draw spells, you have to make sure that you're playing to those ends, right? We kind of aim as a channel to grow a community of brewers that through the chat, through our Discord, through our web pages, everything, we can talk, we can chat, we can brew, we can theorize all these really wonky, exciting ideas. You can always find me in my Discord, which is linked on our deckdesignmtg.com webpage. Or you can find us in the moxfield.com Discord, which is right on their webpage as well. I'll be in there, and right before we started the show, I'm talking to a guy on the Discord over there, and we're brewing up some really interesting things. We were talking about Hydra cards, and he brought up, let me pull up the card real quick. He brought up this card called, where are you? I'm going to pull it up on this guy. Aspect of Hydra. Oop, wrong one. So if we look at this card here, he brought up this card and said, hey, this is like a powerhouse win con. This is something that out of nowhere you could just get them because no one's expecting it, right? I've never seen this card in my life, but this thing is awesome, right? So we're going to pay 1 green mana. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is your devotion to green. And it's instant speed, right? So we can do it with little combat tricks, right? So this is what deck design does, right? So we find all these cards that maybe you don't know about, maybe you don't think of, and we put them together in these beautiful brews, and we kind of come together as a community and really build these things out. A lot of shows, they do deck text, they do things of that nature, but you might not be interested in figuring out, what is the deck that you brewed. I personally want to brew a deck. I want to build it this way. This card jumps out to me and says, okay, well, we're definitely going to be aggro, but maybe it'd be really cool to build a devotion deck, right? So a devotion to green deck. How do we go about making that happen, right? So we put stuff in there like, I don't know, Gigantosaurus, right? Yeah. All right, so here we go. So that card, that 1 mana drop that we just saw, this is going to add in +5/+5 to whatever creature, just because we have, +5/+5. And then if our commander or whatever else we have out there, it's going to add that all together and really dive into what can make a really hyper aggressive deck, right? So that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to get after here at Deck Design, is to focus in and really land on how do we make these brews together, right? As a new player, I'll tell you a personal story from me. My very first deck that I made was a deck that had 26 lands in it, and it was Big Daddy Ur-Dragon. Now, any commander player that has ever played a commander deck of dragons knows that it is insanely expensive, right? Anybody in there in the chat, you guys can back me up on this, because I know that that's the case, right? I didn't know that in the very beginning when I was first deck building. So I literally just dove right in. I said, I want all the dragons. I want to make sure everything's awesome. I got to make sure it's just that and the other thing. Ultimately, what ended up happening was I lost out because I couldn't get anything going fast enough. I couldn't make it happen at all. And it ultimately just ended my whole ability to play that game. I don't want that to happen to you guys. So that's why we're here. Create your win cons. Brew out that stability in your deck, that consistency. That's what we're really looking for. So with that said, let's dive into today's topic a little bit, okay? So what we're going to go over in the beginning here for probably about a half hour or so, whatever it takes to really kind of make it feel comfortable and make everybody kind of vibe with it a little bit, is go over what is Landfall. What does that mean to a newer player, right? So as a newer player, you do look at all of these mechanics and all of these effects that are in Magic, right? At this point, we got, 50, 60, 70 different mechanics that are just floating around, or stuff that acts like mechanics, correct? So we can't learn them all, but one of the really primary ones that kind of made its mark, more or less, in Zendikar block from a couple years back is Landfall. Landfall is, let me show you a great example of Landfall on Tatiova. So this is a great landfall creature that doesn't say landfall, but acts as a landfall creature, okay? This card, Tatiova, Benthic Druid, costs 3, a green, and a blue. It's a legendary creature, Merfolk Druid, for any of you that are listening to the podcast and not on Twitch. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. Okay, so what Landfall is at its core is value when you play your lands. Not just the ability to have access to the mana or to bleed it into your mana pool or anything like that. It's really maximizing the value of your land drops on your plays, right? So that's really what we want to get after. We really want to spend some time and say, okay, what things have landfall here that we can really dive into, right? So if we look at some really interesting ones that are hyper aggressive, really powerful cards. Admonition Angel. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you may exile target non-land permanent other than Admonition Angel. When it leaves the battlefield, return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Admonition Angel is a game-ending card for a lot of players. It's a hyper powerful card, and it's because it's removal on land drops, right? So how many times have we sat down at a commander game and somebody plays a cultivate, right? So a cultivate is put a land onto the battlefield, put one into your hand, right? Well, cultivate just becomes a removal spell when you have the Admonition Angel out, because that land, when it comes in, you don't just destroy something, you exile it. Buy Avacyn, buy anything, it's indestructible, right? All of that stuff becomes accessible just by playing your land drop. Let's keep looking for some more here. We can here is like one of the top landfall creatures that we could actually present to you guys. Everybody loves a solid Avenger player. I was talking to somebody in Reddit, and one of his big things that he definitely wanted included in this Yarrick deck was the Avenger Zendikar combo, as well as, what's up, Nike Man 5712? Thank you for following. Appreciate you. The Avenger of Zendikar deck, or in the deck, comboed with a card like Gaia's Cradle or Growing Rights Vitlamok. What Avenger Zendikar reads, when he enters the battlefield, we're going to create a 0/1 green plant token creature for each land you control. Landfall. This is the landfall portion, okay? So this is the part that we're considering when we're brewing this deck. So landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. Guys, if we're playing a ramp deck and we're really making it like land on land on land, we have 40 lands in our decks, right? Now some of them are shocks, right? So let's take that into account, right? Worst case scenario, we're running maybe 5 shock lands in this deck, and we're running some fetches and stuff like that. Excuse me, I meant to say fetch lands. So stuff that isn't on the battlefield, right? So we play it, sack it, go get a land. So fetch lands, evolving wilds, terramorphic, stuff like that. At minimum, even with all those lands, when we take them into consideration, what are we sitting on? We're still sitting on, what, 30 lands that could be in play at any point in time? Let's say we've played 15 of those lands by mid-game. We're sitting on 15 mana, which is a comfortable bit to be hitting mid-range for some commander games. Not CEDH, so let's make sure we're clear on that. But some commander games. And you play Avenger. Boom, Avenger comes down. We get 15 0/1 plant tokens. And then you play a card like Cultivate, or you play Nissus Pilgrimage, or you play something that enables you to put, I don't know, 2 lands into play. Or you play the Cultivate and hold your land in hand till after you play the Avenger. Then you drop your land for the turn. Then you play your Cultivate, or maybe you play your fetch land. Play your fetch land on the turn, crack it, go get another land. Now you just got 15 2/3 plant creature tokens out on the battlefield for what is 7 mana, and you still have mana untapped. That is a phenomenally powerful effect for anything that's going to happen when you get into a good commander game. It really provides you that overwhelming amount of value, and that's what you want when you're playing something like this. So let's keep taking a look here at some more landfall creatures as we kind of peel through. Here's a cool one. So you don't see it very often, but when you do, it's very dramatic, right? So the Bailiff Woodcrasher. It's 4 and 2 green. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Bailiff Woodcrasher gets +4/+4 and gains trample until the end of turn. This card is a stomp house when it comes into the commander games, especially when you're playing a strict landfall deck, right? So you're playing things, you're going, and then you drop the Bailiff. He can't attack immediately. Maybe you're running a Gruul deck and you can throw a little bit of that haste in there, which is awesome. Definitely capitalize on that. But if you're playing one of these decks and you have this out here, and then all of a sudden you drop, I don't know, 3 lands, this guy's getting plus 12, turning him into a 16/16 and gains trample. There isn't anything that's going to get through that. You're gonna stomp right through everything that's on there. If you're playing green black, maybe you give it death touch. And I don't know if any of you know the interaction between death touch and trample, but that is some of the most insane shit that can happen on a card. You just ping the creature for 1 damage, it dies, and the rest of your damage goes right on through. It doesn't matter if that creature is something huge. If that creature's a 9/9, you're still going to do 1 damage. You're a 16/16. You're going to do 15 damage to your opponent. It's going to go right on through. That kind of power, again, comes from these landfall effects. That's really what we're going to harp on tonight, to really kind of hone that in on Yarrick. Continuing down the way here, let's look at some of the ones down a little bit further here. Oh yeah, here we go. So Lotus Cobra. Let's talk about Lotus Cobra for just a minute here. Lotus Cobra is like one of the most bonkers cards in Yarrick for 2 reasons. All right. So first, let's backpedal just a little bit and let's read Lotus Cobra, and we'll talk about it real quick, because this card has a lot of really cool effects in our deck tonight. This is almost an auto include. There really is an argument against it. So let's dive into this one real quick. So Lotus Cobra, it's 1 and a green. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may add 1 mana of any color. Okay? That is absurd. And it's a 2/1. So what Yarrick says, and we'll get to him, but Yarrick is a panharmonicon on a stick. Okay? If something triggers an effect on a permanent you control, it triggers twice, basically, with Yarrick. Okay? So when you play a Lotus Cobra, and it sticks on the battlefield, and then you play your land for the turn, that land, even if it's an untapped basic forest, okay, you drop that forest card is going to trigger Lotus Cobra not once, but twice. That 1 land just gave you 3 mana. That's an absurd amount of value. Now, on that 1 turn, you have to use that 3 mana, because you're not going to get it every turn. But you will be able to do that. If you get in there and you drop a fetch land, trigger Lotus Cobra twice, crack it, go get a forest, drop it again, untapped, trigger Lotus Cobra a second time, that's 5 mana on a turn where you drop 2 lands. That's insane value, and it's perfect for this deck. And it's really what we want to kind of hone in on, and we really want to make sure that we include this in our brew as we continue down the road here. So let's keep looking at some more stuff. This one is an awesome auto include in a couple. We'll look at actually these 2 because they're really cool. So Nesting Dragon was a creature that came in the pre-con. That was Lord Windgrace. I used to run a Lord Windgrace deck. Lord Windgrace is an awesome deck. It's a powerhouse deck, and it's a lot of value that comes out of all those lands. So with Nesting Dragon, let's read this real quick. It's 3 mana, red and red. Nesting Dragon, it's a creature dragon, obviously. It has flying and landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/2 red dragon egg creature token with Defender. And when this creature dies, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying. And pay 1 red mana. This creature gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. So what this gives you is board wipe protection in your landfall deck, right? So if I make on my turn, I don't know, I've had turns in that deck where I make, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 of these dragon eggs. If I make those, there's a good chance that you won't get the board wipe out of the people that may be a little scared, because right now they're just 0/2 dragon eggs. They can't do anything. But as soon as they die, you get 2/2s for every one of them. Pair that with a doubler, a token doubler, you are making some crazy things, right? You're birthing twins out of all those eggs, and they're all getting that fire breathing effect of pay 1 red mana. These creatures get +1/+0 until the end of turn. That's insane value, again, from these landfalls, right? And not only that, but if we got that kind of effect with like a Panharmonicon on board, again, you're getting 2 of those eggs every time. The token doublers are insane with a lot of these landfalls, so those are going to be some things that we look in as well. Let's look at Ob Nixilis, because that was definitely one that was brought up and definitely will most likely make its way into this Garrett brew. So Ob Nixilis, the Fallen, this is an older one. It was reprinted recently in Iconic Masters. Ob Nixilis, he is 3 black. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target creature lose 3 life. If you do, put 3 +1/+1 counters on Ob Nixilis, the Fallen. Now, a couple things that can happen with this, okay? If you're playing a life drain deck where you're trying to have a low life total for some reason, there are decks out there, I've seen them, you could ping yourself to lose the 3 life. Say you have Crick or Villas on the board, right? Villas is one of the most insane demons that have been printed in a really long time. He is hyper powerful, hyper aggressive. And if he's on board with this, you play your land, you target yourself to lose 3 life. Now you're going to draw 3 cards and put 3 counters on Ob Nixilis. So in one land, you're going to draw 3 cards and put 3 counters on Ob Nixilis. I believe there's a card in Vintage. I think it's called Ancestral Recall. I'm pretty sure. If anybody's in the chat that knows, throw it up there in the chat. I'd love to talk to you guys. But that card is 1 mana, draw 3. We didn't even pay 1 mana. We just put a land in play and drew 3. Now, granted, we have to jump through loops for it, but I'm just saying these interactions are really powerful. You can also play a fetch land. Again, fetch lands are super good in landfall decks, and we will run each of them in this Garrett brew. Fetch lands with this, we play a fetch land, we crack it, we go get another land. That's 2 landfall triggers. Those trigger twice with Garrick. So you're going to have a target player lose 12 life, and you're going to put 12 counters on Ob Nixilis. He's a 15/15 because you played a fetch land with your commander on board. What? That's amazing, amazing value. And that's what we want. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, feel free to fire them away. We're all here to chat. And if anything I'm saying is wrong or incorrect or anything like that, let me know. Like I said, I'm not the world's best brewer, but what I am is a very experienced brewer. I've built really terrible decks, and as of late, I've built really good decks. So, I mean, there's nothing that I am shy or afraid of trying to hook up here. So, one of the things that was brought up, I reached out on Reddit and I said, guys, I need a landfall commander. What would you guys run? You know, just to get involved, to really just participate with those people. And every single Omnath came up. And I'm cool with Omnath. Omnath in the lore is one of, if not my favorite character in Magic the Gathering lore. I love the fact that he's basically just this big old elemental angry dude that is, you know, embodies the royal of Zendikar. He is like this powerhouse of pure mana. I love that is the way that he's designed as a character. And I think it's really it portrays the whole power of the Zendikar mana, mountain land, and all of that stuff that's going on. So, with this guy, so there's 3 Omnaths, okay? We'll look at them all, but we'll start with the Locus of Rage here. So, Omnath Locus of Rage, he's 3 red, green. He is not easy to cast in a lot of decks. You do have to kind of jump through a little bit of hoops and really build your board up to get to a certain point where casting him is in a good spot. But let's talk about his landfall trigger. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token. Again, that's going to trigger twice if we put it in a Panharmonicon style brew. Okay? Whenever Omnath, Locust of Rage, or another elemental you control dies, he lightning bolts any target. Okay? Now, we can't have him in Yarok because we don't have red. Okay? And to be honest, we can make up for that in different areas. But if we're running a red deck, if you're running a Windgrace deck, Omnath, Locust of Rage is a shoe-in that brew. If you're running a Nikia deck, he is a shoe-in that brew because it is so powerful to get that damage out there on the board. Again, it's board wipe protection. At minimum, it's that. At maximum, you could board wipe the board yourself if you have enough tokens out on the board to kill everyone, because you're getting a lightning bolt effect, not just off of all the elementals, but also off of Omnath himself, because he is an elemental. If you're adding Titania to that green that you have in your decks, she makes elementals. That elemental synergy that you're going to build up is going to really kind of roll all together, and you're going to get super powerful effects out of the landfall triggers that come off of Omnath. Continuing down the road here, we have things like the Oran Reef. We have your Baloth. So the Rampaging Baloth is kind of your, I'm brewing landfall. What do I put in? Put in Rampaging Baloth. It just goes. That's just the way it is. Rampaging Baloth is 4 green, has trample, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Again, we're just getting hot value off of these guys by making all these token synergies and all these creatures. You get things like these retreats, the retreat cycle. I haven't seen a lot of these played, but I have. I've seen them played every now and again, and they do get incremental effects off of them. Retreat to Hagra is one that is kind of a powerhouse in the Yarok build. Retreat to Hagra reads landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. It's 2 and a black. It's an enchantment. Sorry. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains death touch until the end of turn. Or, and this is the one you pick 9 times out of 10 when you're doing a Yarok build, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So when you build this into Yarok, each opponent's going to lose 2 life and you're going to gain 2 life because it's going to trigger twice every time you play a land. So let's go back to our fetches with our Yarok build. We play our fetch land. Each opponent loses 2, I gain 2. We crack it, we go get our land. Each opponent loses 2, I gain 2. This card just does so much incremental damage over the game, and it looks so unassuming that people are like, it's okay, we'll let it go for a little while. And then before you know it, they're taking 20 damage over the course of the game, not realizing that, holy crap, we should have removed this way earlier. This should have been gone. We should never even have lived this life. This is a thing that is dangerous. And that's what we want in this brew. As we go through, we got things like Royal Elemental. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. Thievery? That's all this is, and it's amazing. I'm going to play a land. I'm going to steal 2 things. Okay. That's not broken at all, right? So, like, we continue down the list here. We have, let's pick another one here. And again, these are just the landfall creatures. These aren't just anything. I mean, they're the landfall creatures, but there's landfall synergies that come along with them. So that's the thing that we have not. King Koopa, we have not added squandered resources yet, but we will. Also, Alpha America, what's up, man? For anybody that's in the chat or is going to be in the chat, Alpha America is new to Magic the Gathering. So welcome him and keep him happy, and everything is going to be great. So with all of these cards, we're going to build things in that have effects that work with them. Doubles the effects, doubles the tokens, doubles the counters, doubles all the things to really kind of like maximize that value that we're going to get out of it. Sorry, King Koopa. So we are going to get into the deck brew probably in about 5-ish minutes. We got a couple more things I want to talk about. And then we're going to dive right into that brew. So continuing down the way here, we have things like tunneling GOP. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So in Commander, we have 3 opponents usually. Hey Nike man, what's going on? So so with this card, we have 3 opponents that are going to be active on the field. When you are doing this, you just start pinging people, right? And just go nuts with it and just have a lot of fun. Undergrowth Champion, Valakut, so on and so forth. So let's talk about a couple things to go along with this this brew here that some newer players may not really consider when they're brewing this deck. All right, so Landfall, me too, King Koopa, me too. Landfall is definitely one thing that's awesome. We have a player in our meta who just absolutely adores Landfall decks. Has a Kionos Intira deck, K&T. He's got a dude's deck, and it's a Landfall based deck, and it's Pillow 40. It's got like a 65% win rate, which is phenomenal in Commander games. So that's like a powerhouse in and of itself. So let's talk about a couple things that go along with this Landfall thing. Again, when a land enters the battlefield, it triggers something. That's what Landfall is defined as. So how do we prioritize lands over the mana rocks, right? So a lot of EDH decks run a lot of mana rocks. Mana rocks are artifacts that just tap for mana, right? The greatest example of this, which we all know and I firmly believe to be the only staple in any CEDH or EDH deck, is a Soul Ring, right? So if we tap a Soul Ring, it's going to add 2 mana to our mana pool. Yu-Gi-Oh is great. Magic is Yu-Gi-Oh but grown up and way better, and an awesome community. So if you want to get into this, and I know deep down inside you don't want to tell anybody, but you do, I got your back, Jack. You can come on over to the house anytime. So if we're talking about mana rocks, they're artifacts that tap for mana to add it into our mana pool. A lot of decks run these artifacts, but they don't trigger our landfall effects. So how do we delicately balance this lands over mana rocks thing that we have to do, right? So K&T is a 4-color commander. A lot of people want to put in a lot of signets and stuff like that if it's a 4-color commander, but they don't trigger that landfall that we're looking for. So what we want to do is we want to get in those lands that enable us to filter into where we want to be mana wise. All right. Utility lands. How many lands do we want to run? In a landfall deck, we really want to build in a 40 land mana base, just because we want to make sure that we're really consistently hitting those mana triggers, right? I would never ever tell anyone that isn't building a CEDH deck to go any fewer than 36 lands. That's just your happy number. But when landfall is built into the synergy of what you're trying to do in your deck, you really want to maximize all of the ability to hit those triggers every single time. So we need to make sure that 1 out of every 2.2, 2.1 cards that you're going to draw has the potential to be a land, right? 40% of the time we're going to rip a land right off the top, and that's a high percentage when you're talking singleton format. So we want to make sure that we capitalize on that kind of brew strategy. Now, will we put Soul Ring in this deck? You're damn right we'll put Soul Ring in this deck, because it's Soul Ring. It goes in every deck. It has to. It doesn't have to for anybody that's just going to jump on me for that one, but it is the staple of EDH, right? Soul Ring is the powerhouse. It's the turn 1 scary play that everybody dreams about. I'm going to play a 1 land, Soul Ring, Signet, something, right? And just go nuts. Those are the power turns. So, of course, it's going to be in this deck. One last thing with these lands. So, the best triggered abilities or the different win conditions for this deck. A lot of times when we see a landfall deck, it tends to tilt into a token-based strategy. And you see that a lot with green-based decks, right? So this deck, no matter really how we cut it, it's going to be pretty even color-wise, but you're still going to get a lot of those creature-based synergies that come with the green mana. And that's because Magic the Gathering is a creature-based game. That's how we do a lot of our damage. Our damage is in combat, especially if you're a newer player. As you get more experience within the game, maybe you start thinking, combat's a little overrated, and that's fine, and you start brewing in a different direction. We have episodes coming up for that. But with a Landfall deck, your objective here is to really just be big, stompy, overwhelmingly strong to really cut into that life total, that 40 life total these players have. So when we talk about our win conditions, I mean, we can do weird, janky things like those alternate win cons, right? Revel and Riches and stuff like that. But is that what we want to cut into in a Landfall-centric deck? I think tonight we're going to focus a lot on these token-based strategies, and it's going to filter us into a lot of those token doublers and a lot of that mana that comes along with it. So let's take a look at our commander and get into this brew, because that's really what we're here to do, right? I'm gonna go into my decks here. For any of you that don't know, I'm going to be using Moxfield.com as the deck builder. Moxfield.com is the newest deck builder that is out right now. I firmly believe that it is the best deck builder that is designed to do not only what we're trying to do because of the visual aesthetic of the site itself, but for any brewer that is brewing a Magic deck, this is the web page. This is the deck builder, because it's not just a list of cards that gives you its mana cost and its curve and your expense and your cost and all that stuff. It gives you it all in digestible, usable ways, and it makes it all so smooth to interact with and very intuitive. So I suggest, if you haven't already, hop on over to Moxfield.com, start up your own page in there, start brewing some decks, and get in there. And you can brew anything. We're going to brew EDH because that's what we love to do.